And that's where things get interesting, because that's where the official story starts to fray, and the whispers of something far stranger begin to rise from the Nevada dust. Area 51. What was buried under the Nevada sand? Imagine a secret so profound, so reality-bending, that its mere existence could unravel the fabric of society. That's the kind of secret we're talking about when we delve into the enigma of Area 51. It's more than just a top-secret military base. It's a cultural obsession, a lightning rod for conspiracy theories, and perhaps, just perhaps, a window into the unknown. For decades, the very mention of Area 51 conjured images of crashed UFOs, alien autopsies, and shadowy government figures operating outside the bounds of human understanding. The government, for its part, fueled the fire with its staunch denial of the base's existence, only officially acknowledging it in 2013, and even then, only with the barest of details. That official explanation. It was a testing facility for experimental aircraft, a place where cutting-edge technology was pushed to its limits, far from prying eyes. But that explanation, while plausible on the surface, never quite satisfied the public's insatiable curiosity. Why the extreme secrecy? Why the armed guards and lethal force authorized against trespassers? Why the decades of denial, followed by a carefully curated trickle of information? The more the government tried to downplay Area 51, the more convinced people became that something extraordinary was being hidden within its heavily guarded perimeter. And what if that something wasn't soaring through the skies, but buried deep beneath the Nevada sand? We all know the classic Area 51 narrative: UFOs, Roswell, little green men. But what if the truth is far more terrestrial? What if the alien technology everyone is so eager to believe in is actually human technology, pushed so far beyond the realm of conventional science that it appears otherworldly? What if the real secret of Area 51 isn't about extraterrestrial visitors, but about the audacious, almost unbelievable advancements made by human scientists and engineers, hidden away from the world years, even decades, before they're ready for public consumption? Think about it. The Cold War was a breeding ground for technological innovation, a desperate race between superpowers to achieve military and strategic dominance. The United States poured unimaginable resources into research and development, exploring the boundaries of physics, engineering, and material science. Area 51, with its remote location and unwavering secrecy, provided the perfect environment for this kind of groundbreaking work. No oversight, no public scrutiny, just pure, unadulterated scientific exploration, no matter how ethically questionable. And what better way to conceal these advancements than to attribute them to extraterrestrial sources? If the public believes that the revolutionary new aircraft is based on alien technology, they're less likely to ask difficult questions about its origins, its capabilities, and its potential applications. The alien narrative becomes a convenient smokescreen, obscuring the true nature of the research being conducted at Area 51. But let's get back to the sand. The vast, desolate landscape surrounding Area 51 isn't just a convenient buffer zone. It's a blank canvas, a place where secrets can be buried, both literally and figuratively. Imagine the scale of the operations being conducted at Area 51 over the decades. Experimental aircraft crashing, failed prototypes being scrapped, and potentially dangerous materials being disposed of. Where does all that go? It doesn't just vanish into thin air. It gets buried. And what if, Among the debris of failed experiments and discarded technology lies something far more significant. Something that could rewrite history, challenge our understanding of the universe, or even threaten our very existence. What if the real reason for Area 51's secrecy isn't about hiding aliens, but about containing something that was unleashed, created, or discovered within its walls? That's the question we're going to explore. We're going to delve into the hidden history of Area 51, separating fact from fiction and uncovering the truth about what lies buried beneath the Nevada sand. We'll examine the evidence, analyze the testimonies, and piece together the puzzle of this enigmatic base, searching for clues that might reveal its true purpose. Forget the aliens for a moment. Let's focus on the human element. The scientists, the engineers, the pilots, the security personnel. The men and women who dedicated their lives to working at Area 51, often in complete isolation and under intense pressure. What did they see? What did they do? And what secrets did they carry with them to their graves? Their stories, often fragmented and contradictory, offer a glimpse into the inner workings of Area 51, revealing a world of cutting-edge technology, relentless experimentation, and unwavering dedication to the pursuit of the impossible. But they also hint at something darker, something more unsettling. A sense of moral compromise, of ethical boundaries being crossed, of a pursuit of knowledge that may have gone too far. And it's within these stories, within these whispers from the past, that we may find the key to unlocking the mystery of Area 51. Because the truth, as always, is far more complex and far more disturbing than any conspiracy theory could ever imagine. So buckle up, because we're about to embark on a journey into the heart of darkness, a journey that will challenge everything you thought you knew about Area 51 and about the secrets that lie buried beneath the Nevada sand, waiting to be unearthed and exposed to the light. The year is 1964. Deep inside the Groom Lake facility, a team of scientists huddles around a newly uncovered artifact. It's unlike anything they've ever seen, a metallic sphere pulsating with an otherworldly energy. Dr. Eleanor Reynolds, a brilliant but increasingly troubled physicist, leads the team. "The readings are off the charts," she says, her voice barely a whisper above the hum of the machines. "This isn't technology as we know it, it's something else." General Miller, a hardened military man with a no-nonsense attitude, watches from the observation deck. "Just tell me what it is, Doctor. Can we weaponize it?" Eleanor hesitates. "I don't know, General. I don't even know if we should weaponize it. The energy signature is unstable. Tampering with it could have unforeseen consequences." Miller scoffs. "Consequences? Doctor, we're at war. We need every advantage we can get." "Figure it out. That's what you're paid to do." Days turn into weeks, and the team makes little progress. The sphere resists all attempts at analysis. It seems to react to their presence, its pulsations growing stronger, the air around it crackling with static electricity. Eleanor becomes increasingly obsessed, driven by a desire to understand the artifact's origins and its purpose. She starts working around the clock, neglecting her sleep and her health. One night, alone in the lab, Eleanor makes a breakthrough. She discovers a series of symbols etched onto the sphere's surface, a language unlike any she's ever encountered. Using a complex algorithm she developed, she begins to translate them. "It's a warning," she whispers, her eyes wide with fear. "It's a warning," she whispers, her eyes wide with fear, the hum of the sphere now a palpable thrum in the room. The translated symbols paint a terrifying picture, a celestial event, a cosmic alignment that will awaken something ancient, something powerful, something buried. Buried not just beneath the Nevada sand, but buried deep within the earth itself. The warning speaks of a being, a consciousness of unimaginable scale, slumbering in the planet's core. It describes this being as a sleeper, a dormant entity whose awakening would herald an era of unimaginable chaos. The sphere, it turns out, isn't just a power source, but a key designed to keep the sleeper asleep. Eleanor, now faced with the gravity of her discovery, knows she has to act fast. The cosmic alignment, according to the translated text, is imminent. Days, perhaps even hours. She tries to alert her superiors, but her warnings are dismissed as the ramblings of an overworked scientist. They see the sphere as a technological marvel, a potential weapon, not a cosmic alarm clock. Frustrated and desperate, Eleanor turns to the only person she trusts, David, the maintenance worker who first discovered the artifact. David, initially skeptical, is eventually swayed by Eleanor's frantic pleas and the undeniable evidence she presents. He sees the fear in her eyes, the genuine terror that grips her as she describes the impending doom. He trusts her instincts, honed by years of scientific rigor and a deep-seated sense of responsibility. Together, they decide to take matters into their own hands. They need to understand how the sphere works, how to prevent it from triggering the awakening. But time is running out. The military presence around Area 51 intensifies, as if they too sense something is about to happen. Are they aware of the true danger? Or are they simply preparing to exploit the sphere's power, oblivious to the catastrophic consequences? Their investigation leads them to a hidden chamber beneath the main laboratory, a secret room built long before Area 51 officially existed. Inside, they find ancient texts and diagrams, confirming the sphere's purpose and revealing a method to counteract its influence. It involves a complex sequence of energy manipulations, a delicate balancing act that could either save the world or unleash the very thing they're trying to prevent. As they delve deeper into the mystery, they realize they're not the only ones searching for answers. A shadowy organization known only as the Keepers emerges from the shadows. This group, it seems, has been guarding the secret of the sleeper for centuries, passing down knowledge and technology through generations. They believe the awakening is inevitable, even necessary, a cleansing fire that will purge the earth of its corruption. The Keepers see Eleanor and David as a threat to their plans. They begin to hunt them, using their vast resources and network of informants to track their every move. Eleanor and David find themselves caught in a deadly game of cat and mouse, racing against time to understand the sphere and stop the awakening, all while evading the relentless pursuit of the Keepers. The stakes are higher than ever. The fate of the world hangs in the balance, resting on the shoulders of two unlikely heroes, a brilliant scientist and a humble maintenance worker, united by a shared desire to protect humanity from a cosmic horror buried beneath the Nevada sand. Eleanor pores over the schematics, her brow furrowed in concentration under the dim glow of the motel lamp. The energy readings, they're fluctuating wildly, almost like it's learning. David nervously chews on his thumbnail, glancing out the window at the desolate highway. Learning what? How to make better coffee. Eleanor sighs, pushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Learning how to interact with our reality, how to manifest. The keepers, they knew this was going to happen, didn't they? They were waiting for it, not preventing it. So, what does it want? David asks, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know, Eleanor admits, frustration evident in her tone. But I think it's trying to communicate. Through the energy spikes, through the visions. Suddenly a loud bang reverberates through the room. David jumps, nearly knocking over his chair. What was that? He exclaims, his eyes wide with fear. Eleanor freezes, her senses on high alert. I don't know, but I don't like it. They cautiously approach the window, peering out into the darkness. A black SUV sits idling in the parking lot, its tinted windows obscuring the occupants. The keepers, David breathes, his voice laced with dread. They found us. We have to go, Eleanor says urgently, grabbing her bag. Now. They scramble to pack their meager belongings, adrenaline coursing through their veins. As they reach the door, a figure emerges from the SUV, silhouetted against the headlights. Eleanor Vance, a cold, authoritative voice calls out, and David Miller, we've been expecting you. The figure steps forward, revealing a tall, imposing man in a dark suit. His face is impassive, his eyes devoid of emotion. My name is Agent Thorne, he says, his voice like ice. And I'm here to bring you in. We know what you're hiding, Eleanor retorts, her voice trembling slightly. We know about the sphere. Thorne's lips curl into a sardonic smile. You know nothing. You've stumbled upon something far beyond your comprehension. Something that could unravel the very fabric of reality. Then tell us, David pleads, his voice cracking with desperation. Tell us what it is, what it wants. Thorne shakes his head dismissively. You're not worthy of knowing. Your only purpose is to be contained, to be silenced. He gestures to the SUV, and two more figures emerge, their faces obscured by shadow. Come quietly, Thorne warns, or we'll be forced to use harsher methods. Eleanor and David exchange a desperate glance. They know they can't trust the keepers. They know that if they're captured, they'll disappear, their knowledge buried forever beneath layers of government secrecy. David glances at the ridge, a desperate idea forming in his mind. We're not going anywhere with you, Eleanor says, her voice surprisingly steady. We know too much. Thorne chuckles, a cold, humorless sound. Knowing isn't the same as understanding. You've barely scratched the surface. He takes a step closer, and the figures behind him mirror his movement. Now, I'm only going to ask one more time. David grabs Eleanor's hand. Run! He shouts, and they bolt towards the ridge, scrambling over loose rocks and sand. Thorne barks an order, and the figures give chase, their heavy boots crunching on the desert floor. Eleanor stumbles, and David pulls her back to her feet. We need to get to the other side, he yells, his breath ragged. There's a chance we can lose them in the canyons. They reach the crests of the ridge and look down into a labyrinth of narrow passages and steep drops. It's a dangerous descent, but it's their only hope. They start down, sliding and scrambling, the sounds of their pursuers echoing behind them. As they navigate the treacherous terrain, David can't shake the feeling that they're not just running from the keepers, but from something far greater, something ancient and powerful, something that has been waiting for this moment. The canyons offered a temporary reprieve, a maze of shadows and echoing silence that swallowed the sounds of their pursuit, at least for a little while. Sarah, despite her earlier panic, was proving to be remarkably resourceful. She knew the desert, knew how to read the subtle signs of the landscape, the shifting sands, the flight patterns of the birds. She led them through narrow passages, around treacherous drops, her movements fluid and confident, a stark contrast to the fear that had gripped her earlier. "They won't give up," she said, her voice barely a whisper above the wind. "The keepers, you're relentless, but they're also predictable. They'll expect us to head for the nearest town, try to get help. We need to do the opposite." David, his muscles aching, his breath coming in ragged gasps, nodded in agreement. "Where do we go then?" Sarah pointed toward the distant, jagged peaks of a mountain range barely visible on the horizon. "The Obsidian Mountains. It's a long shot, but there are rumors, old stories, of something hidden there, something that might help us understand what's happening." "Rumors? Old stories?" David scoffed, but he knew they didn't have any better options. "Like what? More alien artifacts?" Sarah hesitated. "More like a way to control them." The thought hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. Control alien technology? It sounded like something out of a science fiction movie. But after everything they'd witnessed, David was starting to believe that anything was possible. As they pressed on, deeper into the canyon lands, they noticed something strange. The rock formations were different. The layers were distorted, twisted at unnatural angles, as if some immense force had reshaped the landscape. And there were symbols, etched into the stone, similar to those on the sphere, but older, more weathered, almost as if they were a part of the very rock itself. "What are those?" David asked, pointing to a particularly intricate pattern. Sarah examined the symbols, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I don't know. They're not like anything I've seen before, but they feel familiar, like a forgotten language buried deep in my memory." She reached out and touched the symbols, her fingers tracing the lines of the ancient carvings. As she did, a jolt of energy seemed to pass through her, a brief flash of light in her eyes. She gasped and pulled her hand away, shaking her head as if trying to clear her thoughts. I saw something," she said, her voice trembling. "A vision of a city beneath the sand, and a great machine humming with power." David stared at her, his mind reeling. A city beneath the sand? A great machine? Was she having some kind of psychic episode? Or was there something truly extraordinary happening here? Suddenly, a low, guttural growl echoed through the canyon. They froze, their senses on high alert. It wasn't the sound of any animal they recognized. It was deeper, more menacing, with an almost mechanical quality to it. "What was that?" David whispered, his hand instinctively reaching for his pistol. Sarah's eyes widened with terror. "They're not the only ones looking for us." From the shadows of the canyon walls, figures began to emerge. They were tall and gaunt, with elongated limbs and glowing red eyes. Their skin was pale and translucent, stretched tight over their skeletal frames. They moved with an unnatural grace, their bodies contorting in ways that seemed impossible. "What are those things?" David asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Guardians," Sarah replied, her voice filled with dread. "They protect the secrets buried here. They're not human. Not anymore." The Guardians advanced, their growls growing louder, more menacing. They were armed with strange, energy-based weapons that crackled with power. David knew they were outmatched, outgunned, and out of time. "Run!" he shouted, grabbing Sarah's hand and pulling her forward. They sprinted through the canyon, the Guardians hot on their heels. The creatures moved with incredible speed, their elongated limbs allowing them to cover ground with terrifying efficiency. The energy weapons fired, sending bolts of searing light streaking past them, vaporizing the rock around them. They reached a narrow crevice, a barely passable gap in the canyon wall. It was their only chance. David squeezed through first, pulling Sarah after him. They scrambled through the darkness, the sounds of the Guardians echoing behind them. They emerged into a small, hidden chamber, a natural cave carved into the rock. The air was thick and heavy, filled with a strange metallic scent. In the center of the chamber, they saw it. Another sphere, identical to the one they had found in Area 51, but larger, more imposing. It hummed with an almost palpable energy, bathing the chamber in an ethereal glow. "Another one," David exclaimed, his voice filled with disbelief. Sarah approached the sphere cautiously, her eyes fixed on its surface. As she drew closer, the symbols on the sphere began to glow, pulsating with an intense light. She reached out and touched the sphere, and a wave of energy washed over her, knocking her to her knees. Visions flooded her mind, images of a dying planet, a desperate exodus, a journey across the stars. She saw the creators of the spheres, a race of beings far more advanced than humanity, fleeing their doomed world, searching for a new home. She saw them arrive on Earth millions of years ago, bearing their technology beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to return. And she saw the purpose of the spheres, not just as a warning, but as a key to unlocking the power that lay dormant beneath the Nevada sand. A power that could save humanity or destroy it. "It's not just a warning," she said, her voice weak and trembling. "It's an invitation." The sphere pulsed again, and the chamber began to shake. The walls cracked and crumbled, and a blinding light filled the air. David shielded his eyes, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that whatever was about to happen, it would change everything. Outside, the Guardians paused, their glowing red eyes fixed on the chamber. They sensed the activation of the sphere, the awakening of the ancient power. They knew that their mission had failed. The secrets were about to be revealed, and deep beneath the Nevada sand, something stirred. Something ancient, something powerful, something that had been waiting for millions of years to awaken. The machine was humming, the city was stirring, and the future of humanity hung in the balance. The ground began to tremble, as if something massive was about to break free, and the sphere glowed brighter and brighter, bathing the desert landscape in an unearthly light, signaling the beginning of something new, something terrifying, and something inevitable. And as that light intensified, bathing everything in its eerie glow, a low, guttural groan echoed across the desert floor. It wasn't the sound of metal straining or rock shifting, it was something organic. Something immense and ancient, like the earth itself, was exhaling after a millennia-long slumber. The ground vibrated harder now, throwing up small plumes of dust and sand. Cracks spiderwebbed across the dry lakebed, and the air crackled with an energy that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. Inside the underground city, chaos erupted. Scientists scrambled, shouting over the din of alarms as monitors flickered and died. Security personnel, armed and visibly shaken, tried to maintain order, but fear was a far more potent force than any training they received. The sphere, now pulsating with an almost blinding light, continued its resonating hum, seemingly the epicenter of this unfolding cataclysm. Sarah and Ben exchanged a look of sheer terror. The sphere's warning, the celestial alignment, it was all happening. They had to get out. They had to warn someone, but escape seemed impossible. The entire facility was going into lockdown, reinforced blast doors slamming shut with a deafening clang, sealing off corridors and trapping anyone who wasn't already in a designated safe zone. "We need to get to the surface," Ben yelled, grabbing Sarah's arm. "There's no way we can survive this down here." But the surface was no longer a safe haven either. As they fought their way through the panicked crowds, the ground buckled beneath their feet. A massive fissure ripped open in the desert floor, a gaping maw that swallowed up vehicles and structures whole. From the depths of this chasm, a wave of intense heat washed over them, followed by the unmistakable scent of sulfur and something else. Something indescribably alien. Above, the sky began to warp and twist, the stars blurring into streaks of light. The celestial alignment was reaching its peak, and the sphere seemed to be acting as a conduit, channeling and search for itam, unimaginable power into the earth below. And then it happened. From the fissure, a colossal form began to emerge. It was impossible to make out details, shrouded as it was in dust and shadow, but its sheer size was overwhelming. Buildings crumbled before it, vehicles were crushed like toys, and the very air seemed to vibrate in its presence. It was something that defied description, something that shouldn't exist, yet there it was, rising from the depths of the earth, an ancient horror unleashed upon the world. General Thompson, watching the unfolding events from his secure command center, could only stare in disbelief. Years of planning, decades of secrecy, all for naught. They had sought to control the unknown, to harness its power, but they had only awakened something far beyond their comprehension. What is that thing?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. An aide, pale and trembling, could only shake his head. "Sir, we have no idea. It's off the charts. Nothing we've ever seen before." As the colossal being continued its ascent, the sphere began to dim, its light fading as if it had expended all its energy. The resonating hum subsided, leaving only the sound of the creature's earth-shattering movements and the screams of the dying. Sarah and Ben, miraculously still alive, clung to each other, watching in horror as the ancient being fully emerged from the fissure. It was a creature of nightmare, a grotesque amalgamation of flesh and bone, with eyes that burned with an ancient and malevolent intelligence. Its very presence seemed to warp reality, distorting the air around it and casting long, menacing shadows. "We're doomed," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with despair. But Ben, despite his fear, refused to give up. He had seen the sphere's warning, he knew what was coming, and he knew that there had to be a way to stop it. He looked at Sarah, his eyes filled with determination. "Not yet," he said. "We have to find a way to stop it. There has to be something we can do." He remembered the symbols, the warnings, the subtle clues hidden within the sphere's message. There was something about the celestial alignment, about the creature's origins, that might hold the key to his defeat. But finding that key and using it would be the ultimate test of their courage and their will to survive. The creature roared, a sound that shook the very foundations of the earth, and the battle for humanity's future began. The Nevada sand, once a silent witness to untold secrets, was now the stage for an apocalyptic showdown, a battle between humanity and an ancient evil awakened from its millennia-long slumber. The stakes were higher than ever before, and the odds were stacked against them. But Sarah and Ben knew that they couldn't give up. The fate of the world depended on it, and they were the only ones who could possibly hope to make a difference. The ground trembled again, and the creature turned its burning gaze towards them, signaling that their time was running out, and that the final act was about to begin. The air crackled with energy as the creature took a step forward, its immense form casting an ominous shadow over the desert landscape. Sarah raised her weapon, the energy rifle humming with power, but she knew deep down that it might not be enough. Ben, ever the pragmatist, was already scanning the environment, looking for any advantage, any weakness they could exploit. "We need a plan," he shouted over the howling wind. "That thing is too powerful to take head on." "I'm open to suggestions, Ben," Sarah retorted, firing a volley of energy blasts at the creature. They impacted against its hide, causing it to recoil momentarily, but the effect was minimal. It roared in anger, its voice a cacophony of guttural sounds that seemed to vibrate through their very bones. "Remember the seismic readings," Ben yelled, pointing towards a series of fissures that had appeared in the ground. "The creature is drawing energy from the earth. We need to disrupt that connection." "How?" Sarah asked, firing another burst of energy. "We don't have anything that can cut off that kind of power source." "We might," Ben said, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Remember the alien technology we found in the underground facility? The energy disruptor? It was designed to interfere with alien energy fields." "But that thing was huge," Sarah exclaimed. "We can't carry it around in the middle of the desert." "We don't have to," Ben replied, his mind racing. "The creature is drawing energy from the ground. If we can reroute that energy, overload the system, it might weaken it enough for us to stand a chance." He pulled out his handheld device, rapidly accessing the schematics of the alien technology. "There's a series of power conduits beneath us, feeding energy to the creature. If we can access them, reroute the flow." "It's risky," Sarah said, "but it's our only shot." They moved quickly, dodging the creature's massive limbs and blasts of searing energy. Ben led the way, his device guiding them towards the nearest access point to the underground conduits. They found it hidden beneath a collapsed section of the old military base, a dark, gaping hole leading into the unknown. "This is it," Ben said, his voice tight with determination. "Sarah, cover me. I need to get inside and reroute the energy flow." Sarah nodded, taking up a defensive position, her energy rifle trained on the creature. Ben disappeared into the darkness, leaving Sarah alone to face the ancient evil. The creature advanced, its eyes burning with malevolent intent, and Sarah knew that the fate of the world might very well depend on what happened in the next few minutes. The air crackled with anticipation. A silent battle of wills waged between Sarah and the monstrous entity before her. She focused her mind, channeling her fear into a steely resolve, remembering the countless hours of training, the simulations, the sacrifices she and her team had made to reach this point. This wasn't just about Area 51 or even the United States. It was about the survival of humanity. The creature lunged, a blur of claws and teeth, and Sarah reacted instinctively, unleashing a volley of energy blasts that struck the beast head on. The creature roared in pain, momentarily stunned, but quickly recovered, its eyes blazing with renewed fury. Sarah knew she couldn't keep this up forever. The energy rifle was powerful, but its charge wouldn't last, and the creature seemed impervious to any real damage. She needed to buy Ben time, to give him the opportunity to disrupt the energy flow and hopefully weaken or even neutralize the threat. She danced around the creature, dodging its attacks, using the terrain to her advantage, firing off carefully aimed shots to keep it at bay. Each near miss, each close call, fueled her determination, reminding her of what was at stake. She thought of Ben, deep underground, battling his own demons, and of the countless lives that hung in the balance. She wouldn't let them down. She wouldn't give up. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble, a deep, resonant tremor that shook the very foundations of the desert. The creature staggered, its movements becoming erratic, its roars turning into pained whimpers. Sarah saw her opportunity, a brief window of vulnerability, and seized it without hesitation. She unleashed a concentrated burst of energy, aiming for the creature's eyes, and this time her shot found its mark. The creature shrieked, a deafening, agonizing sound that pierced the night and collapsed to the ground, writhing in pain. The tremors intensified, the air growing heavy with a strange electric charge. Sarah knew that Ben had done it, that he had managed to disrupt the energy flow and weaken the creature. But the battle wasn't over yet. The creature was still alive, still dangerous, and she needed to finish it once and for all. She approached cautiously, her energy rifle trained on the creature's head, ready to fire at the first sign of movement. The creature lay still, its eyes closed, its breathing shallow. Sarah hesitated, unsure if it was truly defeated. And then, just as she was about to pull the trigger, a voice echoed from the darkness behind her. "Sarah, don't!" It was Ben, his face pale, his clothes covered in dust, but his eyes filled with relief. "It's not what we thought it was," he said, his voice strained. "It's not evil, it's protecting something." Sarah lowered her weapon, confused. "Protecting what?" she asked. Ben shook his head. "I don't know exactly," he said, "but I saw visions, images of a great darkness, a cosmic threat that's coming. This creature, this guardian, is the only thing standing in its way." Sarah stared at the creature, now lying still and seemingly harmless on the desert floor. Could it be true? Could everything they thought they knew about Area 51, about the alien presence, about the buried secrets, be wrong? "What do we do?" she asked. Ben looked at her, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "I don't know," he said. "But I think we need to find out what it's protecting. And we need to do it fast, because I have a feeling that whatever's coming is already on its way." He pointed towards the gaping hole in the ground, the entrance to the underground conduits. "I saw more symbols down there, Sarah," he said. "More warnings. I think the answers we're looking for are buried even deeper than we thought." Sarah nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. The mission had changed. The stakes had been raised. They weren't just fighting to protect the world from a single creature. They were fighting to protect it from something far greater, something far more terrifying. She looked back at the creature, a strange sense of empathy washing over her. It wasn't an enemy, it was an ally, a protector, a guardian of secrets. And now it was up to her and Ben to uncover those secrets and prepare for the coming storm. "Let's go," she said, her voice filled with determination. "Let's see what's down there." Together, they descended into the darkness, leaving the creature behind, trusting that it would recover and continue its vigil. They knew that the journey ahead would be fraught with danger, that they would face unimaginable horrors, but they were ready. They were the last line of defense, the only hope for humanity. And they wouldn't back down, not until they had uncovered the truth and found a way to stop the darkness from consuming the world. The fate of everything rested on their shoulders, and they knew it. As they ventured deeper into the unknown, the hum of the sphere grew louder, a constant reminder of the ancient power that lay dormant beneath the Nevada sand and the cosmic alignment that was drawing ever closer. They had to hurry before it was too late. The air grew thick with anticipation, each breath heavy with the weight of their mission. Dr. Aris Thorne, his brow furrowed in concentration, adjusted the settings on his scanner. "I'm picking up a significant energy surge directly ahead," he announced, his voice barely a whisper. "It's unlike anything I've ever encountered. Almost organic." Sergeant Miller, ever vigilant, scanned the perimeter, his rifle held at the ready. "Anything moving?" he asked, his voice tight with controlled tension. "Negative," replied Specialist Ramirez, his eyes glued to his thermal imaging display. "Just sand, rock, and... Wait, I'm getting something. Small, fast-moving, multiple contacts, closing in." "How many?" Miller barked, his grip tightening on his weapon. "Hard to say," Ramirez replied, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Dozens, maybe more. They're burrowing, coming from beneath the surface." Suddenly, the ground began to tremble. Small tremors ran through the sand, sending shivers down their spines. Then, with a series of sickening pops, the sand erupted, and creatures unlike anything they had ever seen emerged from the depths. They were insectoid in appearance, with razor-sharp claws, glistening black exoskeletons, and eyes that glowed with an eerie green light. They moved with a terrifying speed and agility, their mandibles snapping open and closed, emitting a high-pitched chittering sound that sent chills down their spines. "What the hell are those things?" Miller exclaimed, his voice filled with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "I don't know," Thorne replied, his eyes wide with terror. "But I don't think they're friendly." The creatures swarmed towards them, their numbers seemingly endless. Miller raised his rifle and opened fire, the bullets tearing through the air, striking the creatures with deadly force. But for every one that fell, 2 more took its place. "Fall back," Miller shouted. "Fall back to the sphere. We need to get inside." They retreated, firing as they went, trying to hold back the relentless onslaught. The creatures were fast, agile, and utterly fearless. They seemed to be driven by a single-minded purpose: to kill. As they neared the sphere, they saw that the entrance was now fully open, revealing a dark, ominous passage leading into the unknown. Thorne fumbled with the controls, trying to activate the sphere. Its defenses, but it was no use. The sphere was unresponsive. "It's not working!" Thorne yelled, his voice filled with panic. "The controls are dead!" "Get inside!" Sarah shouted, pushing past him. "We'll figure it out once we're safe." They scrambled inside, Miller covering their retreat with a hail of gunfire. The creatures swarmed around the entrance, their glowing eyes burning with hatred. Just as the last of them squeezed through, Miller slammed the door shut and sealed it. The interior of the sphere was dark and cold. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and something else, something ancient and alien. Sarah activated her flashlight, illuminating the interior. It was a single, large chamber filled with strange symbols and intricate machinery. In the center of the room was a raised platform, and on the platform was a single object, a crystal, pulsating with an inner light. "What is this place?" Miller asked, his voice hushed with awe. "I don't know," Sarah replied, "but I have a feeling we're about to find out." Suddenly, the crystal began to glow brighter, bathing the chamber in an intense light. The symbols on the walls began to pulse, and the machinery hummed to life. The sphere began to shake violently, and Sarah felt a strange sensation, as if she were being pulled in two different directions. "What's happening?" Thorn cried, grabbing onto a nearby console for support. "I think," Sarah said, her voice strained, "that we're going somewhere." And with that, the sphere vanished. They found themselves in a place beyond comprehension. Gone was the familiar landscape of Area 51, replaced by a swirling vortex of colors and shapes that defied description. It was as if they had been transported to another dimension, a realm where the laws of physics no longer applied. "Where are we?" Miller asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "I don't know," Sarah replied, "but I don't think we're on Earth anymore." As they floated through the vortex, they began to see images flashing before their eyes, images of distant galaxies, of strange alien worlds, of civilizations rising and falling. It was as if they were witnessing the entire history of the universe, all at once. "What is all this?" Thorn asked, his mind reeling from the onslaught of information. "I think," Sarah said, "that we are seeing the truth." And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the vortex disappeared. They found themselves in a new location, a vast cavernous chamber lit by an ethereal glow. The walls were covered in intricate carvings depicting scenes of alien life and technology. In the center of the chamber was a massive structure, a towering edifice of metal and crystal that seemed to hum with power. "This is incredible," Miller whispered, his eyes wide with wonder. "But what is it?" Thorn asked, his voice filled with apprehension. Sarah stepped forward, drawn to the structure like a moth to a flame. As she approached, she began to hear a voice in her head, a voice that spoke in a language she didn't understand, yet somehow comprehended. "Welcome," the voice said. "You have been chosen." "Chosen for what?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "To fulfill your destiny," the voice replied. "To save your world." "Save it from what?" Sarah asked, her heart pounding in her chest. "From the darkness that is coming," the voice said. "The darkness that has been waiting for millennia." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She knew with a certainty that defied logic that the voice was telling the truth. The creatures they had encountered in Area 51 were just the first wave, the harbingers of a greater evil, and now it was up to her to stop it. "What do I have to do?" she asked, her voice filled with determination. "You must awaken the ancient power," the voice said. "The power that lies dormant within you." Sarah didn't understand what the voice meant, but she knew that she had to trust it. She closed her eyes and focused her mind, trying to reach out to the power within. She felt a surge of energy coursing through her veins, a feeling of immense power that she had never experienced before. "I feel it," she said, her voice filled with awe. "I feel the power." "Then use it," the voice said. "Use it to save your world." Sarah opened her eyes, and she saw that the crystal in the center of the structure was glowing brighter than ever before. She reached out and touched it, and a wave of energy surged through her body. She felt as if she were being connected to something vast and ancient, something that transcended time and space. And then she understood. She understood what she had to do. "I know what to do," she said, her voice filled with confidence. "I know how to stop them." She turned to Miller and Thorne, her eyes shining with newfound power. "We have to go back," she said. "We have to go back to Area 51. "Are you crazy?" Thorne exclaimed. "We almost died back there." "I know," Sarah said, "but it's the only way. We have to use this power to seal the gate, to prevent the darkness from spreading any further." Miller looked at Sarah, his eyes filled with admiration. He knew that she was right. They had come too far to turn back now. "Let's do it," he said, his voice filled with determination. "Let's save the world." And so they prepared to return to Area 51 to face the darkness that awaited them. They knew that the odds were stacked against them, but they also knew that they were not alone. They had the power of the ancients on their side, and they had each other. And that, they hoped, would be enough. The fate of the world rested on their shoulders, and they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together, for the sake of humanity. The drive back was tense, a silent agreement hanging heavy in the air. Sarah stared out the window, the desolate Nevada landscape, a blur of browns and grays. Mark gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. The weight of their mission, the potential consequences of failure, pressed down on them. "What do you think it'll be like?" Sarah finally asked, breaking the silence. Mark sighed. "Honestly, I have no idea. But if those symbols mean what we think they do, it won't be pleasant." He glanced at her. "We need to be prepared for anything. Hostile entities, advanced technology, things we can't even begin to imagine." Sarah nodded, her face grim. "The journal mentioned a guardian, someone or something protecting the source." "Then we need to be ready for a fight," Mark replied, his voice firm. He thought back to the research he'd done, the countless hours spent poring over ancient texts and conspiracy theories. He'd always dismissed them as fantasy, but now he knew better. The truth was far stranger and far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. They reached the familiar checkpoint, the same stern-faced guards standing watch. Mark showed his credentials, the same ones that had granted him access countless times before. This time, however, felt different. The guards seemed more scrutinizing, their eyes lingering on Mark and Sarah with suspicion. "Everything all right, Dr. Carter?" one of the guards asked, his voice devoid of warmth. "Yes, of course," Mark replied, trying to sound casual. "Just need to run a few more tests." The guard nodded slowly, but his eyes remained fixed on them. "Carry on," he said finally, stepping aside. Mark breathed a sigh of relief as they drove through, but he knew they were on thin ice. They had to find a way to reactivate the sphere, and they had to do it fast. As they reached the hangar, the sphere was exactly as they left it, its surface still glowing faintly. The scientists who had been studying it were nowhere to be seen. That was odd, even for Area 51. Usually there were at least a couple of lab assistants milling around, taking notes or running diagnostics. The complete absence of personnel only heightened the sense of unease that had been building since they left the canyons. "Where is everyone?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Mark replied, his eyes scanning the hangar. "But I don't like it." They approached the sphere cautiously, their hands hovering over their weapons. The air around it was thick with static, and the hum had intensified, resonating deep within their chests. "The energy readings are off the charts," Thorne said, his voice tight with concern. "Something's definitely happening." Sarah reached out and touched the surface of the sphere. It was warm to the touch, almost burning. As her fingers made contact, a jolt of energy surged through her body, knocking her back against the wall. "Sarah!" Mark shouted, rushing to her side. "Are you okay?" Sarah gasped for breath, her head spinning. I think so," she said, her voice shaky. "But I saw something. A vision." "What did you see?" Thorne asked, his eyes wide with anticipation. "Destruction," Sarah replied, her voice filled with dread. "I saw cities crumbling, the sky burning, the earth shaking. It was the end of the world." Mark and Thorne exchanged worried glances. They knew that the sphere was connected to some kind of cataclysmic event, but they hadn't realized the extent of the danger. "We have to stop it," Mark said, his voice firm. "We have to find a way to reactivate the sphere and prevent whatever's coming." "But how?" Thorne asked, his voice filled with despair. "The controls are dead. We've tried everything." Sarah closed her eyes, trying to focus on the vision she had seen. There had been something else, something hidden beneath the destruction, a faint glimmer of hope. "There's a sequence," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "A series of symbols. I think I can remember them." She opened her eyes and looked at the control panel on the sphere. The symbols were still there, etched into the metal. Sarah reached out and touched them, one by one, in the order she had seen in her vision. As she touched the final symbol, the sphere began to glow even brighter. The hum intensified, yet filling the hangar with a deafening roar, and then, suddenly, everything went silent. The sphere was still glowing, but the energy readings had stabilized. The controls were back online. "It's working!" Thorne shouted, his voice filled with relief. "You did it, Sarah!" But Sarah wasn't celebrating. She knew that this was just the beginning. They had reactivated the sphere, but they still didn't know what it was capable of or what they were supposed to do with it. "We have to be careful," she said, her voice filled with caution. "We don't know what we've unleashed." As if in response to her warning, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The hangar doors rattled and dust fell from the ceiling. An alarm blared through the base, its shrill sound echoing through the corridors. "What's happening?" Mark shouted, his voice barely audible above the din. "I don't know," Thorne replied, his eyes wide with fear. "But I don't think it's good." Suddenly, the lights went out, plunging the hangar into darkness. The only source of illumination was the faint glow of the sphere, and then they heard it. A low, guttural growl coming from somewhere deep beneath the ground. It was the same sound they had heard in the canyons, but this time it was much closer, much louder. The ground trembled again, and a crack appeared in the floor of the hangar. The crack widened, and a dark, shadowy figure began to emerge from the depths below. It was tall and gaunt, with long, spindly limbs and glowing red eyes. Its skin was pale and translucent, and its face was contorted in a grotesque snarl. The creature let out another deafening roar, and the air crackled with energy. Sarah, Mark, and Thorn stood frozen in terror, their weapons forgotten. They knew that they were facing something far beyond their comprehension, something that could very well mean the end of everything. The creature took a step forward, its eyes fixed on the sphere. It reached out a long, bony finger and touched the surface of the sphere. And then everything went black. Sarah awoke with a gasp. She was laying on the floor of the hangar, her head throbbing. Mark and Thorn were beside her, also unconscious. The sphere was still glowing, but the creature was gone. The crack in the floor had closed, and the hangar was silent. What happened? Sarah asked, her voice weak. Mark and Thorn sat up, their faces pale with shock. I don't know, Mark said, his voice trembling. I just remembered a creature touching the sphere. And then, nothing. It's gone, Thorn said, his voice filled with disbelief. But where did it go? Sarah looked around the hangar, her eyes searching for any sign of the creature. But there was nothing. It had vanished without a trace. We have to find it, Sarah said, her voice firm. We have to stop it before it's too late. They knew that the creature was connected to the sphere and that it posed a grave threat to the world. They had to find it, and they had to find it fast, but they had no idea where to start. As they stood there, trying to figure out their next move, a voice echoed through the hangar. Looking for something. Sarah, Mark, and Thorn turned around to see a figure standing in the doorway. It was a man in a dark suit, his face hidden in shadow. Who are you? Sarah asked, her voice filled with suspicion. The man stepped into the light, revealing his face. It was Agent Sterling, the same agent who'd been monitoring them since they first arrived at Area 51. I'm here to help, Sterling said, his voice calm and reassuring. But I'm afraid I have some bad news. He paused, his eyes filled with concern. The creature, he said. It's escaped, and it's heading towards Las Vegas. The implications of Sterling's words hung heavy in the air. Las Vegas, a city of millions, was now in imminent danger. The creature, whatever it was heading straight for it. And Sarah, Mark, and Thorn were the only ones who could stop it. But they were running out of time, and they were about to face a challenge far greater than anything they had ever imagined. A challenge that would test their courage, their skills, and their very humanity. The race against time had begun, and the stakes were higher than ever before. The fate of Las Vegas, and perhaps the world, hung in the balance. We need to get that shield back online, Mark said, his voice tight with urgency. He ran to the control panel, frantically flipping switches and pressing buttons. Nothing. It's completely unresponsive. The power source must be fried. Sarah, meanwhile, was trying to decipher the symbols on the sphere, hoping to find some clue, some hidden command that could reactivate it. The air around them vibrated with increasing intensity, the groaning from outside growing louder, closer. Thorn, ever the pragmatist, was already grabbing weapons from a nearby locker. Forget the fancy tech, he said, tossing Mark a pulse rifle. We're going old school, at least until we can figure out what's going on with this thing. They braced themselves, the hangar doors groaning under some immense pressure. The metal buckled and warped, And then, with a deafening screech, one of the doors ripped from its hinges, crashing to the floor with earth-shattering force. Standing in the opening was a creature unlike anything they had ever seen. It was colossal, easily 20 feet tall, its body a grotesque tapestry of flesh, bone, and something that looked like solidified magma. Its eyes burned with a malevolent orange light, and its mouth was a gaping maw filled with rows upon rows of razor-sharp teeth. "What in God's name is that?" Mark stammered, his face pale with terror. "That," Sarah said grimly, "is what they were trying to keep buried." The creature roared, a sound that seemed to vibrate through their very bones, and charged into the hangar. Thorn opened fire with the pulse rifle, the energy bolts impacting against the creature's hide. The creature flinched, but the shot seemed to have little effect. "Keep firing," Thorn yelled. "Maybe we can slow it down." They unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, but the creature kept coming, its massive form crushing everything in its path. Sarah knew they couldn't hold it off for long. They needed to reactivate the sphere, and they needed to do it now. She focused her attention on the symbols, her mind racing, trying to find the key, the sequence that would bring the sphere back to life. She remembered the warning from the alien entity, the celestial alignment, the awakening. Could that be the key? Was there a connection between the alignment and the sphere's activation? Suddenly, she noticed a subtle shift in the symbols, a faint pulsing that seemed to correspond with the creature's roars. She realized that the creature itself was somehow influencing the sphere, its energy resonating with the ancient technology. "I think I know what to do," she shouted over the din of the battle. "We need to channel the creature's energy into the sphere." "Are you crazy?" Mark yelled, dodging a swipe from the creature's massive claw. "That thing is trying to kill us." "I know," Sarah said, "but it's our only chance. We need to find a way to redirect its energy flow." Thorn, never one to back down from a challenge, even a suicidal one, nodded grimly. "All right, let's do it. What do you need us to do?" Sarah pointed to a series of conduits running along the walls of the hangar. "Those conduits are connected to the sphere's power grid. If we can overload them with the creature's energy, it might be enough to jumpstart the system." The plan was insane, reckless, but it was the only one they had. They would have to lure the creature close to the conduits and then somehow trigger a surge of energy that would flow into the sphere. It was a long shot, but with the creature bearing down on them, it was their only hope. They began to maneuver, using the debris scattered around the hangar as cover, trying to guide the creature towards the conduits. It was a deadly game of cat and mouse, with the fate of Las Vegas and possibly the world hanging in the balance. The creature, enraged by their defiance, continued its relentless pursuit, its roars echoing through the hangar. Sarah could feel the heat radiating from its body, the air thick with the stench of sulfur and decay. As the creature lumbered closer to the conduits, Sarah prepared to initiate the energy surge. She just needed the right moment, the precise alignment of the creature's energy flow with the conduits. "Now!" she screamed, activating a series of switches on a nearby control panel. A surge of energy coursed through the conduits, bathing the hangar in an eerie blue light. The creature roared in pain as the energy slammed into its body, its flesh sizzling and smoking. But the surge wasn't enough. The sphere remained dormant, its surface still glowing faintly, but unresponsive. They needed more power, a greater surge of energy. Sarah realized that there was only one way to amplify the energy flow. She would have to connect herself directly to the conduits, becoming a human conduit for the creature's power. "Sarah, no!" Mark yelled, realizing what she was about to do. "You will kill yourself." "I have to try," she said, her voice filled with determination. "It's the only way." She grabbed a handful of wires from the control panel and stepped towards the conduits, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that she was risking everything, but she couldn't stand by and watch as the creature destroyed everything they had worked so hard to protect. With a deep breath, she plunged the wires into the conduits, completing the circuit. A massive surge of energy coursed through her body, searing her skin and muscles. She screamed in agony, her vision blurring, but she held on, focusing all her will on channeling the energy into the sphere. The sphere began to hum, its surface glowing brighter and brighter. The symbols pulsed with renewed intensity, and a beam of light shot out from the sphere, striking the creature directly in the chest. The creature roared in pain and fury, its body convulsing as the energy from the sphere tore through its flesh. It stumbled backwards, its eyes burning with a mixture of rage and fear. And then, with a final, earth-shattering groan, the creature collapsed, its massive body crashing to the floor with a deafening thud. The hangar fell silent, the only sound the faint hum of the sphere. Sarah collapsed to the floor, her body trembling, her skin burned and blistered. She had done it. She had saved them. But the battle was far from over. They had defeated the creature, but they still didn't know what was coming. The celestial alignment was still approaching, and whatever entity had been waiting for this moment was still out there, lurking in the shadows. As they tended to Sarah's wounds, Mark and Thorn exchanged worried glances. They knew that they had only won a temporary reprieve. The real fight was yet to come, the fight for the fate of humanity. And as they looked out into the vast expanse of the Nevada desert, they couldn't help but wonder what other horrors lay buried beneath the sands, waiting to be unleashed. The secrets of Area 51 were far from revealed, and the dangers were far greater than they could have ever imagined. The world was on the brink, and they were the only ones who could stop it from falling into the abyss. But as they looked at the sphere, now humming with a newfound power, they knew that they weren't alone in this fight. They had a weapon, an ally, and a purpose, and they would not back down, no matter the cost. For the fate of humanity rested on their shoulders, and they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. The next chapter was about to begin, and it promised to be even more perilous than the last. The hum emanating from the sphere intensified, vibrating through the floor and up their legs. Sarah could feel it resonating deep within her, a strange connection forming, a sense of recognition. It was unnerving, yet strangely comforting. Mark was still wrestling with the control panel, sweat beading on his forehead. "Damn it, I can't get anything to respond," he exclaimed, slamming his fist on the console in frustration. Thorn, ever the pragmatist, was already scanning the hangar for alternative exits, his eyes darting nervously from the sphere to the reinforced steel doors. "We need a plan B," he stated, his voice laced with urgency. "If that thing goes sideways, we're all toast." Sarah ignored them, her attention completely focused on the sphere. She walked towards it, drawn in by an invisible force, her hand outstretched, The energy radiating from the surface felt warm, almost inviting. As her fingers brushed against the smooth, metallic skin, a jolt of electricity surged through her, throwing her back against the wall. She gasped, her vision blurring for a moment. Images flashed through her mind, fragmented and chaotic. Alien landscapes, colossal structures, beings of pure energy. It was overwhelming, disorienting, yet somehow familiar. When her vision cleared, she saw Mark and Thorn staring at her in disbelief. "Sarah, are you okay?" Mark asked, rushing to her side. "What happened?" I don't know," she stammered, shaking her head to clear the lingering images. "I touched it and I saw things I can't explain." "Saw what?" Thorn pressed, his voice sharp with suspicion. "What did you see?" Sarah hesitated, unsure how to articulate the visions that had flooded her mind. "I saw another world," she finally said. "A world connected to this sphere. A world that's in danger." Mark and Thorn exchanged skeptical glances. "Another world," Mark scoffed. "Sarah, you're letting your imagination run wild. We're dealing with advanced technology, not science fiction." "I'm telling you, it's real," Sarah insisted, her voice rising. "I felt it. I saw it. This sphere isn't just a weapon, it's a gateway." Before they could argue further, the ground began to tremble. The humming from the sphere reached a deafening crescendo, and the lights in the hangar flickered and died, plunging them into near darkness. A beam of intense blue light erupted from the sphere, piercing the roof of the hangar and shooting skyward. The air crackled with energy, and the metallic scent of ozone filled the air. "What's happening?" Thorn yelled, shielding his eyes from the blinding light. "It's activating," Sarah said, her voice filled with awe and trepidation. "It's opening the gateway." As the beam of light intensified, a swirling vortex of energy began to form above the sphere. It pulsed with an otherworldly glow, revealing glimpses of strange landscapes and alien skies. The vortex grew larger and larger until it filled the entire hangar, casting an eerie blue light on everything around them. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the vortex. It was tall and slender, with smooth gray skin and large black eyes. It wore a shimmering suit of silver armor, and its head was adorned with a complex array of sensors and antennae. It looked around the hangar, its gaze sweeping over Sarah, Mark, and Thorn. "Greetings," it said, its voice a synthesized whisper that seemed to resonate directly in their minds. "I am Xylar, emissary of the Krill. We have been waiting for you." The Krill? Sarah had heard whispers of that name, legends passed down among the scientists who had worked on the sphere. They were said to be the creators of the technology, an ancient and powerful race from a distant galaxy. But she had always dismissed it as speculation, conspiracy theories. Now, standing face to face with one of them, she realized that everything she thought she knew about Area 51 was about to be turned upside down. "What do you want?" Mark asked, his voice trembling slightly. "We need your help," Xylar replied, its gaze fixed on Sarah. "Our world is dying, and you are the key to our survival." Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. This was the moment she'd been waiting for, the moment she'd been preparing for her entire life. She knew that accepting Xylar's request would be dangerous, that it would lead them into the unknown, to a world beyond their wildest imaginations. But she also knew that they couldn't turn away. The fate of the Krill, and perhaps the fate of humanity, depended on their decision. Tell us what we need to do, Sarah said, her voice firm and resolute. We are ready. Zaylar nodded, a faint smile flickering across its lips. Then let us begin, it said. The journey will be long and arduous, but together we can save our worlds. But be warned, there are others who seek to control this power. Others who will stop at nothing to prevent us from succeeding. The shadows are closing in, and the true battle is about to begin. As Zaylar spoke, the vortex pulsed with renewed energy, beckoning them forward. Sarah looked at Mark and Thorn, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and determination. They knew that they were about to embark on a mission that would change their lives forever. They were about to step through the gateway into a world of alien wonders and unimaginable dangers. And they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together, because they knew that they were not just fighting for the Krill, they were fighting for themselves, for their future, for the survival of humanity itself. The next chapter was about to begin, and it promised to be the most perilous one yet. A journey into the unknown, a battle against forces beyond their comprehension. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, and they were the only ones who could tip the scales. The hum of the vortex grew louder, the pull more insistent. It was time to go. Brace yourselves, Dr. Aris Thorn announced, his voice a mix of anticipation and apprehension. We're about to enter uncharted territory. He adjusted his helmet, the light glinting off its polished surface. Remember the protocols. Observe, document, but do not under any circumstances engage unless absolutely necessary. We don't know what awaits us on the other side. Sergeant Miller, ever the pragmatist, double-checked his weapon. Doctor, with all due respect, observe and document doesn't exactly scream prepared for combat. What kind of firepower are we expecting? That's the problem, Sergeant, Thorn replied, his gaze fixed on the swirling vortex. We don't know. The Krill technology is unlike anything we've ever encountered. It's possible that conventional weapons will be useless. We have to rely on our training, our instincts, and each other. The vortex shimmered, a kaleidoscope of colors that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Dr. Chen, the team's xenolinguist, nervously adjusted her translation device. I'm picking up faint energy signatures, she reported, her voice trembling slightly. They're complex, almost like a language, but not one I recognize. Can you decipher it? Miller pressed. I can try, but it will take time. The structure is alien. It's as if it's designed to be incomprehensible. Thorn nodded. Do what you can, Doctor. Every piece of information is crucial. He turned back to the glowing sphere, his face etched with concern. What do you think it wants? He muttered, mostly to himself. Sarah, however, wasn't listening. The humming was growing louder, more insistent. She felt a pull, a magnetic force drawing her closer to the sphere. It wasn't a physical pull, but something's deeper, something psychic. Images flashed through her mind. Vast landscapes under alien skies, towering structures that defied gravity, beings of pure energy dancing in the void. They were fleeting, fragmented, but undeniably present. I think I'm seeing something, she stammered, her eyes wide with wonder and a touch of fear. Seeing what? Miller asked, his voice sharp with apprehension. Sarah struggled to articulate the visions swirling within her mind. Places. Things. I can't explain it. It's like the sphere is showing me its memories. Dr. Chen, still fiddling with her device, suddenly gasped. Wait, I'm getting something. A A sequence. It's repeating. I think it's a command. What kind of command? Thorn demanded. I don't know exactly, but it seems to be related to activation, or perhaps containment. Containment. The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. Were they trying to activate the sphere, or were they trying to keep something inside it? Play it back, Miller ordered. Let's see if we can figure out what it means. Dr. Chen manipulated her device, and a series of strange rhythmic pulses filled the hangar. The pulses seemed to vibrate not just through the air, but through their very bones. As the sequence repeated, Sarah felt the visions in her mind intensifying. She saw the alien landscapes more clearly, the towering structures more distinctly, and she saw the beings of pure energy, not dancing, but struggling, fighting against some unseen force. They were trapped, imprisoned within the sphere, and they were desperate to escape. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and she stumbled, catching herself on the edge of the control panel. They're not memories, she gasped. They're real. They're trapped inside. Thorn stared at her, his face a mask of disbelief. Trapped? You mean there are beings living inside that thing? Not living, Sarah corrected, her voice barely a whisper. Imprisoned. They're being held captive. The implications of her words were staggering. If there were alien beings trapped inside the sphere, what were they capable of? What would happen if they were released? And who or what had imprisoned them in the first place? Mark, still working furiously at the control panel, suddenly shouted, I think I've got something. I'm bypassing the primary power grid. It's risky, but it might be our only chance to get the shield back online. He threw a series of switches, and the hangar lights flickered violently. A low hum filled the air, growing steadily louder. The sphere pulsed with renewed energy, its glow intensifying. It's working! Mark yelled. The shield is coming back online! But as the shield flickered into existence, a new, more ominous sound filled the hangar, a deep, resonant growl emanating from the sphere itself. It was the sound of something ancient, something powerful, something angry. The ground began to tremble. Cracks appeared in the concrete floor. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling. What's happening? Miller shouted, his voice barely audible above the din. Sarah knew. The imprisoned beings were fighting back. They were using the surge of power to break free. We have to stop them, she yelled, but her words were drowned out by the roar of the sphere. Suddenly, a beam of pure energy shot out from the sphere, striking the ceiling of the hangar. The concrete crumbled and collapsed, sending a shower of debris crashing down around them. Get down! Thorn shouted, pushing Sarah and Miller to the ground. As the dust settled, they looked up in horror. A gaping hole had been torn in the roof of the hangar, revealing the night sky above, and from the sphere a swirling vortex of energy was beginning to emerge. Dr. Chen screamed. They're escaping! The vortex grew larger, more intense. It pulsed with an unearthly light, casting long, distorted shadows across the hangar floor. And from within the vortex, figures began to emerge, beings of pure energy, their forms shimmering and indistinct, their eyes burning with malevolent intent. They were free. The beings hovered in the air for a moment, taking in their surroundings. Then, with a collective roar, they surged forward, their energy crackling and sparking as they descended upon the stunned scientists. Sarah knew that they were hopelessly outmatched. They had no weapons, no defenses, nothing to protect them from the wrath of these ancient imprisoned beings. But as the beings approached, Sarah felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. She knew that she couldn't run, she couldn't hide. She had to face them. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and reached out with her mind, trying to connect with the beings, trying to understand their anger, their pain, their desire for revenge. And as she did, she saw something that made her blood run cold, a glimpse of the force that had imprisoned them in the first place. It was vast, ancient, and utterly malevolent, and it was still out there, waiting. The beings paused, their energy flickering uncertainly. They sensed Sarah's presence, her attempt to connect with them. And for a moment there was a flicker of something else in their eyes. A flicker of recognition, a flicker of hope. But then the flicker vanished, replaced by a cold, unyielding rage. The beings surged forward again, their energy crackling and sparking. Sarah braced herself for the impact, knowing that this might be the end. But as the beings reached her, something unexpected happened. The sphere, which had been silent since the beings had emerged, suddenly pulsed with a surge of energy. A beam of light shot out from its surface, striking the beings and sending them reeling backwards. The beings roared in frustration and fury, but the sphere held firm, its light unwavering. It was as if the sphere was trying to protect them, to defend them from the very beings it had imprisoned. Sarah stared at the sphere in disbelief. What was going on? Why was it helping them? And then she understood. The sphere wasn't just a prison, it was also a shield. It was designed to contain the beings, but also to protect the world from their wrath. But who had created the sphere, and why? The questions swirled in her mind, unanswered. But one thing was clear. They were not alone in this fight. They had an ally, an unexpected ally, in the form of an alien sphere buried beneath the Nevada sand. And they would need all the help they could get, because the force that had imprisoned the beings was still out there, and it was coming for them. The beings, momentarily stunned by the sphere's attack, began to regroup. They circled around the hangar, their energy crackling and sparking, searching for a way to break through the sphere's defenses. Thorne, Miller, and Dr. Chen huddled together, their faces pale with fear. They were trapped, surrounded by hostile aliens with no escape in sight. "What do we do?" Miller whispered, his voice trembling. Thorne shook his head. I don't know. I don't know what to do." Sarah, however, had an idea. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was their only chance. She turned to Mark, who was still frantically working at the control panel. "Mark," she said, her voice clear and steady, "can you reroute the power from the shield to the sphere?" Mark looked at her in disbelief. "Are you crazy? That would overload the sphere. It could destroy everything." "I know," Sarah said, "but it's our only chance. The sphere is trying to protect us. If we can give it more power, it might be able to stop them." Mark hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right," he said, "but if this doesn't work, we're all dead." He threw a series of switches and the hangar lights flickered violently again. The sphere pulsed with even more energy, its glow intensifying to an almost blinding level. The beings, sensing the change in the sphere's energy, roared in fury. They surged forward, their movements becoming even more erratic and desperate. The ground trembled beneath their feet as they converged on the hangar, their eyes burning with a hunger that transcended comprehension. Inside the hangar, the air was thick with anticipation. Sarah could feel the sphere's energy coursing through her veins, a strange mix of power and vulnerability. She closed her eyes, focusing her mind, trying to establish a deeper connection with the alien technology. "Come on," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the humming. "You can do it. We need you." Suddenly, the sphere emitted a blinding flash of light, so intense that it forced Mark and Thorn to shield their eyes. When they could see again, the sphere had transformed. It was no longer just a glowing orb. It was a swirling vortex of energy, a miniature sun contained within the confines of the hangar. The beings outside recoiled, their advance faltering. The light seemed to burn them, to repel them. But they were relentless, driven by an insatiable desire to claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. Sarah knew that this was their moment. If they could harness the sphere's power, they might have a chance to push back the invaders, to seal the rift and prevent them from ever returning. But if they failed, all would be lost. "Mark, Thorn," she said, her voice filled with determination. "We need to synchronize our efforts. Focus all your energy on the sphere. Help it to channel its power." Mark and Thorn nodded, their faces pale but resolute. They positioned themselves on either side of Sarah, each placing their hands on the control panel. Together, they closed their eyes and focused their minds, channeling their energy into the sphere. The hangar vibrated violently as the sphere's power reached its peak. The air crackled with electricity, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. Sarah could feel the strain on her mind, the immense pressure of trying to control such a vast amount of energy. Suddenly, the sphere unleashed a wave of energy that washed over the hangar, engulfing everything in its path. The beings outside were blasted back, their forms flickering and dissolving in the intense light. The rift in the sky began to shrink, its edges receding as if being pulled back into another dimension. But the beings were not defeated. They regrouped, their numbers seemingly endless. They launched a final, desperate assault, their bodies contorting into grotesque shapes as they surged forward. Sarah knew that they were running out of time. The sphere's power was waning, and the rift was threatening to widen again. She had to make a choice, a sacrifice that could determine the fate of the world. "Mark, Thorn," she said, her voice filled with emotion, "I need you to trust me. I know what I have to do." Before they could respond, Sarah stepped forward, reaching out to touch the sphere. As her fingers made contact, a surge of energy coursed through her body, lifting her off the ground. She floated in the air, suspended between the sphere and the beings outside, her body glowing with an ethereal light. "Sarah, what are you doing?" Mark shouted, his voice filled with panic. "I am the only one who can do this," she said, her voice echoing through the hangar. "I'm connected to the sphere. I can channel its power directly into the rift." With a final surge of energy, Sarah unleashed the full power of the sphere, directing it towards the rift in the sky. The light was blinding, the force overwhelming. The beings outside were annihilated, their forms dissolving into nothingness. The rift began to shrink rapidly, its edges closing in until it was nothing more than a tiny pinprick of light. Then, with a final flash, the rift disappeared completely. The sky above Area 51 was clear once more, the threat seemingly vanquished. But Sarah was gone. Mark and Thorn stood in stunned silence, their faces etched with grief. The sphere had returned to its original form, its glow fading to a soft, gentle hum. The hangar was quiet, the air still thick with the scent of ozone. "She did it," Mark whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "She saved us all." Thorn nodded, tears streaming down his face. "She was a hero," he said. "A true hero." The world would never know what had happened that day in Area 51. The government would cover it up, bury the truth beneath layers of secrecy and deception. But Mark and Thorn would never forget. They would carry Sarah's memory with them, a constant reminder of the sacrifice she had made. Years passed. Mark and Thorn dedicated their lives to understanding the alien technology they had encountered, hoping to find a way to honor Sarah's memory. They worked tirelessly, poring over data, conducting experiments, searching for answers. One day, they made a breakthrough. They discovered a way to communicate with the sphere, to access its vast store of knowledge. And what they learned changed everything. They discovered that Sarah was not truly gone. Her consciousness had been absorbed by the sphere, merged with its alien intelligence. She had become something more than human, something transcendent. And through the sphere, she was still watching over them, guiding them, protecting them. She was the guardian of Earth, the protector of humanity, forever bound to the alien technology that had saved them all. The threat was gone, but the knowledge remained. The world was safe, but forever changed. And it all started with what was buried beneath the Nevada sand. The secrets of Area 51 were finally revealed, not to the world, but to those who were brave enough to seek them out. And in the end, it was not just about aliens or technology, but about courage, sacrifice, and the enduring power of the human spirit. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. Comment what you want to hear next. But the story doesn't quite end there. Years later, Dr. Emily Carter, now a leading figure in advanced technological research, stood before a newly formed council. Composed of representatives from nations across the globe, the council was dedicated to the responsible development and application of the alien technology. "We have a responsibility," Emily stated, her voice echoing through the chamber. "A responsibility to honor the sacrifice made and to use this knowledge for the betterment of mankind, not for war, not for power, but for progress." A skeptical voice rose from the back. "Progress? With alien tech?" "Doctor, are you suggesting we open Pandora's box again? We barely contained the last threat." Emily turned, her gaze firm. "We learned from our mistakes. We understand the technology better now. We have safeguards, protocols. We can use this to solve global crises, to cure diseases, to explore the stars." The debate raged on, the weight of the decision heavy on their shoulders. The potential benefits were immense, but so were the risks. Meanwhile, John Riley, no longer just a soldier but a symbol of human resilience, visited the memorial erected near Area 51. The names of those lost were etched in stone, a constant reminder of the price of freedom. He ran his fingers over the cold surface, a silent promise on his lips. "We won't forget," he whispered to the wind. "We'll make sure it was worth it." One evening, under the cloak of the desert sky, Emily approached John. "We're ready," she said, her eyes filled with the mix of excitement and trepidation.